Before the video starts, just a quick reminder to go check out the Chilling app. If you can't get enough content from me here on this channel, myself and other narrators here on YouTube are going to be providing hours of unique and spine-tingling scary story narrations exclusively over on the Chilling app. There's new narrations from me added weekly, and there's new professional narrators constantly being added to the list. There's hundreds of scary stories to binge on, from monsters, paranormal, thrillers, and true scary stories. The Chilling app even has classic novels, vintage horror radio, and true crime stories. And this all can be enjoyed with their one-of-a-kind ambient menu, where you can mix in immersive and relaxing sound effects like a crackling fire, dark storms, and chill rain, and adjust their volumes independently, and a sleep timer so you can drift off to dreamland without interruptions after. They even curated a sleep-tight playlist with all the longest stories in one place. Click the link in the description or the pinned comment to try the free trial of the Chilling app, and after that it's only $2.99 a month, which makes it completely ad and interruption free. And don't forget, Chilling is giving away a PS5 Super Bundle. There's another link below with simple instructions on how to enter. A winner will be decided December 10th, just in time for the holiday. Thanks so much, friends, and enjoy the stories. In 2014, I moved to England from Canada to gain work and travel experience, and also to find myself. I ended up living in Essex with 3 other roommates. They were all women, all a bit older than I was. I was 24 at the time, Megan was 31, Cherry was 34, and Cassie was 38. Megan was from New York, Cherry from New Jersey, and Cassie from Poland. All 4 of us shared this 3-story flat. The back of our home was the living room and kitchen. The back wall was complete glass that looked out into the garden. The garden was completely fenced in. The house had an interesting dynamic, to say the least. Tons of stories from that time in my life. I adored all of my roommates except for Cherry. After living with Cherry for 7 months, I was over her antics. One day I come home from work, I lock the door, make myself something to eat, and go up to bed. I brought some work home with me, so I am in my nightie with all of these papers around me and my headphones on, jamming out. I had headphones on because Cherry was out to dinner with work friends. That meant booze, and then soon after that a tantrum was surely to come. I just didn't want to have to listen to her crazy scream crying anymore. I'm working away, completely focused, until I feel something. I look up to see a man standing over me. I don't register it right away and passively say, Cherry's room's on the 2nd floor, and continue to work. Cherry regularly brought home strange men. He doesn't leave. Again, Cherry's room is downstairs, He then interrupts me. I'm not here for Cherry. A cold chill iced my veins. My fight or flight kicked in just then. I started surveying the situation. I look him up and down. He has a bottle of Prosecco in one hand and a knife in the other. He's about 5'10", wild, muddy brown hair and black eyes. He has a light blue polo shirt on, and one side of his collar has popped up in a distinct Manchester accent. Once I focused in, I realized his eyes were black because his pupils were completely dilated. I was in trouble. I needed an escape plan. Unfortunately, this man was standing in between me and my bedroom door. I needed to get downstairs, but I needed for him to think it was his idea. I decided to play along. Just then, he uses his knife to pop the cork. Fresco starts flowing onto my carpet. I said, "Oh no, let's clean that up. I prefer to drink out of a proper flute anyways." He nodded, replying, "Yeah, you're a proper classy bird. Let's go." I try to act as natural as possible. I try not to show that I'm shaking all over and try to gain control over my breathing. We take the long journey down to the main floor of my flat, all 3 floors. He has the back of my nightie bunched up in one hand, and I could feel the point of the knife graze my back with his other. I was trying to playfully speak with him as we walked down the stairs. I couldn't tell you what I was saying. I was most likely rambling. I couldn't hear anything over my heart beating in my ears. We got to the bottom of the stairs, and there is a hallway to my left that leads to the front door. On my right, which is much closer to us, is the kitchen and living room. We make our way into the kitchen. I point to the cabinets that had the wine glasses. He said he knew where they were and starts towards them. I now had the kitchen table in between us. It was time to run. I burst into a sprint down the hallway towards the door. My hands fumble over the locks, shaking and sweating. I swing open the door and see two men walking across the street. They must have been walking home from the train. There was a big train station in front of our home. I call out to them for help and suddenly I'm flung onto the ground. Little pebbles piercing my skin sent sharp pains where they jabbed. The intruder pushed me out of the way to run and escape. One of the men chased after the intruder while the other said for me to go inside while he surveyed my home to call the police. I locked the doors and I called the police. While I'm on the phone with dispatch, I manically run around the house to double-check all the windows and doors. Suddenly I hear a loud bang on my door. I inform the dispatcher of the banging and she informs me that police weren't there yet. I thought it might be one of the gentlemen who helped me. I go to look out the eye hole, and it's him, the intruder. He came back. He's banging on my door, screaming that I had his glasses and that he was not done with me. I absolutely freak out. The dispatcher attempts to calm me down, but I'm losing my ever-loving mind. She then said, "They're pulling onto your street now. You should hear their sirens." I did, thank God. The intruder then blasts off, and one officer jumps out of the passenger side while the car is still moving and chases after him. The second officer comes into my home, interviews me and the two gentlemen, collects evidence and takes photos. After some time of him being there, Cherry comes home and freaks out. Once the situation was explained to her, she said, "Oh my God, that could have been me." Yeah, thanks Cherry. It's all about you. The next morning, I am called to identify a man that they had in custody. I pointed him out. I go into a little room and the officer pulls out an evidence bag. He asked me if the items were mine. They were. They were my underwear and photos taken from my home. The officer informed me that the intruder had been stalking me for some time now, and he estimated 3 months. He had made a nest outside our home on top of a hill that overlooked into our living room and kitchen. He was a known offender and drug dealer. He then told me how lucky I was to get out practically unharmed, as others weren't so lucky. Years ago, man, I'm old, but let's say mid-1990s, I worked as a woodland firefighter while in the Army Reserves. I worked as a spotter. Basically, I was stationed in a giant fire tower in the middle of a national park. My job was just as it sounds. I would use binoculars and look out for fire, smoke, other telltale signs of fire. My nearest compadre was 5 miles or so from me. My days consisted of working my shift, taking long walks around the fire tower, and being on the lookout for anyone who might be having illegal fires. I'd be looking out for wildlife and staying afoot of bears and wolves. The way our shifts worked back then was 1 week on, 1 week off. So we slept in the towers, cooked our food, etc. There were nearby toilets and showers for our hygienic needs. One day I come across an illegal bear trap. I had several ranger friends and I safely set off the trap, then picked it up to take it to the ranger station on one of my treks out for food in my Jeep. Poaching is illegal in the park and carried a big fine even back then and some jail time, but it didn't stop the poachers from trying. I heard rifle shots and headed back for my fire tower. We have a rifle in the tower to be used in cases of emergency. Just a few months back, a fellow spotter had been mauled to death by a grizzly, so each tower had been outfitted with a rifle. I looked with my binoculars, but didn't see anything out of the ordinary. I radioed my coworker Ben, an older guy in the adjacent tower. He hadn't heard anything today, but had come across a few traps himself. That night, after a dinner of franken beans and toast, I was writing to my future wife when I heard the rumbling of a truck. Thinking it may be Ben, occasionally he made the trek over, we would crack open a soda and chew the fat for a bit. Instead, I saw 4 men with rifles get out of the truck. One looked around and leaned up against the truck while the other 3 grabbed traps and began to set them up. I grabbed the rifle and my lantern and headed down the stairs. I was only 21, a farmer's son from a rural Virginia farming town, and even with one deployment behind me, I was naive. I should have called it in to the Rangers, but instead I thought I could talk some sense into 4 dangerous men. I barely got a "hey, what are you doing?" out of my mouth before I was roughly shoved by rough hands. My lantern fell, and I heard it crack. The rifle was kicked away from me, and I felt the breath leave my chest when I was violently kicked in the stomach. I barely had caught my breath when I was grabbed by the 2 of the men and was shoved forward into the woods. It seemed like we walked for miles, but in reality it was probably only about a mile. However, I noticed that there were no sounds. In the forest, it is rarely silent. It's a cacophony of sounds, even at night. Owls, the wolves, crickets. But on this night, nothing. Suddenly I was shoved onto my knees and I felt hot tears well up. I thought of my parents, my little sister and brother, and my fiancée who were back home in Virginia. I heard the rack of a gun and I shut my eyes and prayed. And suddenly, the night erupted. However, it was the sounds of sirens, those of the forest rangers, and behind them in his pickup, Ben, who had tried to radio me that he heard a car's engine and came to my tower when I didn't reply. Those poachers were arrested. Ben drove me back to the tower and I was still shaking. He didn't lay into me for not following procedure, just said, "That was close, kid." I ended up leaving the job months later to take a job closer to home, but I never ran into any more poachers during the rest of my time. I kept in contact with Ben for a while, sent him a wedding invite and then a photo of my firstborn son in 1997. However, as time usually does, we lost track of one another, and a few years back I Googled him, and he would have been 75 or so to discover that he passed away a few years back. I don't know whatever came of those poachers, but I know I never want to meet them again. This happened when I was in high school, a long time ago. My mom just recently found the paperwork about it when she cleaned out her office upon retiring from the police department. I remember being upset and scared when it happened, but reading the details as an adult, it sounded even worse than I remembered. I was 17 years old, I'm a female, working at a flower and gift shop. It's nighttime and a man comes in. He's short, overweight, balding, 40s, just generally creepy. He tells me how he needs an apology gift for his girlfriend. So I offer a bouquet. Obviously, it's a flower shop, what am I supposed to say? He says she doesn't like flowers because they die. This was the first weird thing, as he came into a flower shop. Then he goes into detail about how he hit her and asked me if I think he was right to do so. This was a long time ago, so I don't exactly remember what I said, but it was something along the lines of, not if you wanted to continue being your girlfriend. He then tells me what a great job I'm doing and asks when I get off of work. I dodge answering and he just leaves. Now, nothing for 6 months. Then right before Valentine's Day, he walks in the door 1 minute before close. It was dark, and from the outside it looked like I was working alone, as my coworker, about a 40-year-old female, was in the bathroom. Instinctively, it felt like a predator had just entered the room. You know when something isn't right, and everything felt not right? I then noticed that he had a tarnished revolver tucked in the front of his windbreaker, which is halfway unzipped. It was obvious he wanted it seen. I quickly scribbled a note to my coworker that said, "He has a gun," and handed it to her when she came out of the bathroom. She calmly walked to the phone and looked at me, wordlessly asking if she should call the cops. I shook my head no, as I felt like it would escalate the situation. God forbid he heard the police coming and took us hostage or something. I was just going to try and act as calm and normal as possible, and hopefully not tip the situation to something more dangerous. He spends 15 minutes wandering around what was a fairly small shop. In retrospect, he was probably waiting to see if my coworker would leave, as it was now well past closing. Finally, he places an order for pickup on Valentine's Day, which gives me his name and info to put in the police report that I sure as heck was about to file. He buys a card and pulls out a wad of $100 bills, which he slowly thumbs through as though looking for the right one with which to pay for his $40 order. I ask him if he wants a bag, as it wouldn't be very inconspicuous if he just showed up at home with a Valentine's card. He replies, "Nah, I didn't feel like being inconspicuous tonight," which seemed like an obvious reference to the gun hanging out of his coat. He leaves. We quickly lock the door and watch him sit in his truck outside. We're not about to exit the shop until he was gone. Finally, he pulls out of his parking spot and moves to another spot further away and continues to just sit there. I don't know how long we waited, but he finally left. I called my mom crying. She called the police, who came to the shop the next day to take a report. I told my best friend at the time what happened. She told her mother. Her mother happened to work with the man and informed security at her job. She said he was very weird, creepy, and liked to talk about weapons a lot. Security at his job, it's a large company with government contracts and things having to deal with tech and security, pulled him into the office and questioned him about it. He claimed it was a glove in his pocket, not a revolver. The police were livid that his company made contact with him about it before they did, and he successfully dodged the cops' multiple calls and visits to his apartment. My mom, much to my teen fury at the time, made me quit my job, which was devastating as I loved it there. In retrospect, it was totally the right call. Dude came in on Valentine's Day and picked up his order, and I never saw him again. Legit, only 3 people know this story because I don't talk about it. The events happened 13 years ago, and it still messes with me to this day, even though I'm not in any sort of danger currently. When I was in college, I got super depressed and stressed out near my junior year. I was always super into school and just started slipping near the end of my college term, so it threw me off bad. Never experiencing failing a subject before, and it threw me into ridiculous stress. I graduated and figured everything would just go away with it. But I found myself feeling very mentally foggy. My sister knew how bad off I was from the last few years of school, so she hatched a plan to surprise me. I always wanted to go to Miami growing up. I know how lame that sounds, but being a girl who grew up in the Midwest and even went to college there, it was always super exciting looking to me. Up to this point, I traveled, but never went anywhere as lively or as big as Miami always seemed. My sister planned a 5-night vacation with me as a way to get me out of this mental fog and also to celebrate in our own way of me graduating college. I was super excited. The few months passed and it was time for the trip. We get there and the first few nights were incredible. We hit up the restaurants. I had on my little list of places to try and spent many hours by the ocean. I was never a big party girl. Up to this point in my life, I was drunk maybe twice. My sister was the opposite, who was at every party that happened in her hometown. She got bored of going back to the room so early every night and convinced me to go to a nightclub with her for the first time. I fought it a bit, but let my guard down because I was feeling great for the first time in a long time and was ready to try new things. It was a Saturday night downtown in the middle of summer. We get to this nightclub and the line is legitimately wrapped around the building. It was massive. We waited in line for what felt like forever and were let in finally. I walked in the door and felt like I got shot because of the loudness. My sister dragged me to the bar and ordered some shots of some drink with a funny name. Again, I decided to just let my guard down and try new things. As more shots went down, I decided that would be the theme of the night. Try new stuff out. I was aware how boring I was and was, in my opinion, in the most exciting place in the world. Around 45 minutes into dancing and drinking, I became very drunk, borderline blackout. I was very sloppy drunk and I was aware of it. I found myself laying on a couch thing in the upstairs area overlooking the dance floor as my sister was dancing with some guys. As I stayed there trying to consciously sober myself up, I realized how badly I had to pee. So I brought myself up to a sitting position on the couch to stand up and walk to the nearby bathroom. As I sat up, a massive man quickly sat so close to me I could feel his leather pants pressed on my leg. He was huge, absolutely over 6 foot tall and looked like some sort of bodybuilder. Admittedly, he was very good looking, but I was so drunk that I wasn't even trying to flirt and just get up to find the bathroom. He smiled at me and yelled over the music something like, "Leaving so soon." I remember nervously laughing and attempted to get up, but He grabbed on my dress and pulled me back down to a sitting position next to him. His smile went away and he said in a very deep tone, "I don't remember telling you that you were allowed to leave." Even though I was very drunk leading up to this, I felt like I sobered up within seconds. I never had anything like that happen before, but I wasn't going to just allow this guy, no matter how much bigger he is than me, to do that to me. I attempted to stand up again and he did the exact same thing, but much more overly aggressive. I thought it was insanely rude, but I wasn't afraid because of many people were around me. He tapped my heels with his big yellow leather boots and said, "I couldn't help but notice how much I wanted to have my way with your feet." At that moment, my fight or flight kicked in. I slapped him in the face and stood up to walk away. I was very uncomfortable, but I still wasn't afraid just because of the amount of people around. As I was walking away, I heard him laughing and he yelled, "I'm trying to decide if I want to keep your feet after I cut the rest of your body up into little pieces." I still hear it in my mind play out clear as day. I walked away very quickly as I attempted to search for my sister on the dance floor from above. I couldn't find her, so I decided to take my phone out to text her just to see if I had a missed call from her. I was out of eyeshot from this dude and cut away into the bathroom so I could call her back. It was still pretty loud in there, but it wasn't loud enough to where she couldn't hear me on the phone. I went into a stall and called her. As I was in the stall, I hear the bathroom door open and someone went into the one directly next to me. I was waiting for her to pick up when I looked down underneath the stall and saw the same guy's very distinct yellow leather boots. He was just standing there, and I felt like I was about to die. I know he knew I was in there, and I held my breath and hung up the phone, just staring at his shoes. Not moving a single bit from where he shut the door, I heard the main bathroom door open again, and I immediately ran out of the stall, out the door, and straight to the outside of the club without slowing down once. I was terrified. It just so happens my sister was close to where I came out, trying to call me to ask if I was ready to leave. I told her we needed to get back as soon as possible. We got back to the room safely, and I told her everything that transpired. She suggested calling the police, but I was just ready to drop it. We changed our flight, and the next night flew back home. I searched for years pretty actively online for an arrest in the area to see if he would ever come up, and he never did. After a few years, I moved on mentally and got over it for the most part. It's definitely hands down the scariest moment in my life. And I don't know who this guy was, and if he was just saying these things to scare me, or if maybe he was serious. But dude from the club, let's not meet. A few years ago, I entered the University of Lausanne to start my medical studies. I had just arrived in the city and even in the country. I was very excited to start my year, to discover the university and to meet new people. Everything was going great until the end of the third week. Friday night around 9 p.m., I leave the library, say goodbye to my friends, and start to go home. The pace of work was already very intense, so we had been working all day and I was in a rush to get home. It was my favorite part of the day because I got to put on music, take the subway, then the train, and it gives me a chance to rest mentally. Anyway, that night it was cold, so there was no one left outside. It takes me about 7 minutes to walk from the library to the subway. I'm walking quietly with my music in my ears when all of a sudden I get a shiver that runs through my body from head to toe. I start to feel uncomfortable as if someone was watching me. And at that point, I pause my music and decide not to turn around to check in case the person is trying to be really inconspicuous, and if I notice them, something might happen. I don't want to run either because I'm not sure if I can run faster and I don't know where to go. At this point, we pass a glass building, so I decide to look inside and pretend I'm fixing my hair. I quickly glance in the corner of my eye and my blood runs cold. There is definitely someone walking a few feet behind me in a hoodie. I try to reassure myself that he's just finished work and then he's going home, that he's cold and that's why he's wearing his hoodie. But I didn't see a backpack, and there are no houses for any other civilians around. I decide to send a message to my mother saying, "Come and get me in front of," insert the name of the building. "Please, I just really don't feel it." It's important to know that the university is 30 minutes by car from my house. At this moment, I don't find any other solution, and I decide to take refuge in a building while waiting for my mother to come and get me. As I was about to go back, I opened the door and took off my helmet and went down the stairs to find a hiding place. We entered by the 3rd floor. I thought I was out of trouble when suddenly I hear the door that I came in through open. This time I am sure that he's after me. But since I'm new, I don't know this building and where it leads. I run downstairs at full speed, and I hear behind me the footsteps of this guy running down the stairs at full speed. I run without looking back, being sure that he's running faster than me and that he'll catch up with me at any time. I don't even know where I'm going, but I pray that I don't fall into a dead end. Now looking back, I even think that it was really like The Shining with the labyrinth scene. I didn't know how far ahead of him I was, so I opened a window in the hallway to make it look like I was out of there and opened a door a little further. It was a huge auditorium in the dark. I went down the stairs and hid under a desk in the middle right and put my phone on silent. My mom had been texting me a lot, asking me what was going on and saying she was on her way with my dad. I texted her, "I'm in insert name of building and he's looking for me, please come quickly." I hid under that desk thinking I'm screwed. My hiding place sucked and he was going to find me any second. Then I heard a loud thud and a huge scream, and I don't think I've ever been so scared in my life as when I heard that scream. 15 minutes later, my mother was sending me messages telling me to hang on. And at the end of those 15 long minutes waiting for him to find me, I finally got the message from my mom where she says she's with the police. They're going to enter the building and they need to know where I am. I just tell them I'm on the 2nd floor because I had no idea what room I was in or which way I was going. After 2 minutes, I hear the door of the auditorium, and it was the police that came to get me. Once I got out, they took my statement and said that they would check with the university management. The next day, they contacted us and said that they saw on the surveillance cameras that there was indeed someone who had followed me when I entered the building, but there were no cameras inside. You can't see the guy's face, and therefore you don't know who it is. They just said that security was going to do patrols at night and advised me to have someone with me when I went out at that time. We never heard about it again, and in my mind, that's good. This happened the winter when I was 10. I was walking to the bus stop by myself, and out of nowhere, this red car drove past me and stopped. I walked by it, and a man yelled, "Hey kid." I turned and saw the guy, and he was in his early 20s. He motioned for me to come, but I stood still. He then said, "I saw you coming out of 355 Terrace Road. Was that man your dad?" I had no idea how this person knew where I lived, and I got so creeped out that I ran. I glanced back and was surprised to see that he wasn't following me. That night I was finishing up some homework where I had to track the phases of the moon. I went to my window and was shocked to see that same red car had parked across the street. I quickly ran to my parents sobbing and explained everything to them. I didn't say anything earlier in fear of getting in trouble. My dad called the cops and they arrested the man on the spot. My parents went outside to see what in God's name was going on, and the dumbstruck cop explained the bizarre story the man had told them. The guy was a rookie PI, or private investigator, that was hired by a wife who suspected her husband was having an affair whenever he visited the city we lived in. The husband gave his wife our address and told her he was staying with a friend. When the police showed my parents the picture of the husband, they both laughed. The man didn't even look remotely like my dad. The only thing they had in common was their dark hair and light skin. This private investigator was sobbing in the cop car, and my dad didn't press charges because he felt bad. I'm a very tall, 45-year-old guy on medical disability due to renal failure, weak bones, etc. I wanted to make lunch rather than be lazy and order a pizza, and despite the pain caused by walking, I decided to walk the 30-minute round trip as part of my mandated exercise. I get to the local small store, masked up, and go grab some basics to make a quick meal. While I'm in there, I feel a sharp pain fly up my back, then my left leg, and I start limping. Knowing that when this happens, I have about 20 minutes tops before the pain gets too much and I go and get my stuff paid for. I leave and cross over the street and sit on a public bench and let my pains fade. Once the pain faded, I started walking again, only for two young guys in suits to come up to me wearing badges, identifying them as members of the Church of England. Asked me if I was okay and that letting God into my life would stop the pain. I politely told them I'm fine, I just needed to get home before it flares up again, and, big mistake, told them I'm not religious. Believe in what you like, but I don't anymore. Get told that it's their job to save me in the Word of God. I start to walk off, but my leg flares up again and I start limping. These two guys follow me and keep trying to stop me despite me saying to leave me alone, telling me they need to help me. I get to my house, open the door, then they try to push into my house. I stand in the doorway, now in agony, freaking out, and anxiety takes over. My retired neighbor sees them and comes over just as I lose it. I tell them, "This is private property. You're trespassing and making me feel unsafe. Buzz off." They look offended, but my neighbor tells them to leave me alone. They storm off, grumbling. My neighbor helps me sit and makes my meal, stays with me till I calm down. I called the Church of England and complained about my interaction. I get an apology and told that the two workers will be retrained and kept out of my area. Not seen them since. There were two different ones who asked how I was, and thankfully they've left me alone otherwise. In October 2020, I was working in a department store at guest services and a woman came in with school supplies to return. She looked to be in her 40s and wore a scarf that covered her face and head in compliance with the mask order at the time. She said the school supplies were a gift for the school, but she couldn't use them, so she was returning them. I had trouble finding the items in our system, and unfortunately for me, this gave her plenty of time to talk. At first, she was just texting with someone using speech-to-text. Someone who seemed to be checking up on her, asking where she was, what she was doing, and what she was thinking about God. She replied, "I'm at the store. I've been learning to ask God for things the way I would ask a husband." It gave me bad vibes, but I reminded myself it wasn't my business. Then the woman started talking to me again. She seemed dazed. Her speech was slow and odd, as if she didn't quite remember how to string words together, but not slurred or drunken. She went on for a while about how she suffered financial losses during the pandemic, but found a new church and having faith was everything to her now. Really, it is a blessing. Being deprived of things, even food, that's how you find God. She started getting a bit pushy, forcing a connection like she wanted to convert me, but I tried to be polite and ignore my hang-ups. A lot of customers needed emotional support at that time, and it wasn't the first conversation I'd had that was a little too personal. I said things like, "It's a dark time right now. It's important to have someone to help you get through." All the time thinking, who's checking up on her? Did someone deliberately deprive her of food? Is that why she's so out of it? Is she in a cult? She kept staring at me the whole time I was wrestling with the return and eventually noticed my scars. My daughter self-harms," she said out of the blue. "She tears chunks out of her face." And I asked her, "Why do you do that?" She told me, "I just get so frustrated." So I told her that it's the devil making her do that. I didn't know what to say at that point, so I just kept updating her on the return. Then she started reading my name off my name tag over and over again. "Jesse, Jesse, Jesse," slowly and strangely. It made me wish I hadn't worn my name tag that day. I didn't like her knowing my name. I didn't want her to know anything about me. I finished the return as quickly as I could and pushed the items I couldn't return back at her. "I'm sorry, but they're no longer in our system. I hope you can find use for them." "Thank you. And Jesse?" "Yes?" "Here's my face." She pulled down the green scarf and flashed a huge grin at me. "Okay," I said blankly, and she finally left. I signed out of the register and went to take 5 in the back room. I've had some bad interactions at work before, but this was by far the creepiest. I still wonder about this woman and her daughter. Did I meet a cult member? Was cult abuse leading her daughter to self-harm, or was I just jumping to conclusions based on my own bad experiences and too much true crime shows? I hope they got away from any bad influences in their lives and are doing better, but also, I hope this woman stays away from me. I'm a 22-year-old female, a shipped shopper, and mostly work nights because that's when most orders are available, and I generally only accept orders in the zone closest to my home. One night I decided I wanted to do one last order with a delivery window between 10 and 11 p.m., but there weren't any available in my usual zone, so I figured I'd just pick one up on the other side of town to close out my day. During my shop, there were lots of things on this customer's list that were out of stock, and he had specified on his account that he'd like to be contacted in that situation. I was shopping for him for about 30 to 40 minutes and sent him probably 10 different texts about things that needed substitutes, and he didn't receive an answer until I was ready to check out and had reached out to him one last time, letting him know that that's what was happening. He finally told me to just use my best judgment, to which I replied no problem. Fast forward to having his items bagged and in my car. I sent him a text letting him know that I'm heading his way and that I'd be there in about 15 minutes, as I do for all my customers. I get to his street and it already isn't the best part of town, which I didn't know before I accepted the order because I hadn't been over that way since I've lived where I do now. And I'm thinking, okay, no problem. Just make it a quick drop-off and get back home. When I get to the house, the driveway is completely on the left side of the house and there's a porch only on the right corner that leads to the front door. So I can't see the door from the driveway and nobody could see that I was in the driveway if they were at the door. I can see that there are multiple porch lights as well as lights around the house leading up to the door, but none of them are turned on. Now mind you, I have told this person I was on my way, gave him my estimated timeline, and pressed a button in the shipped app to notify him that I had arrived. At this point, I'm feeling a knot in my stomach and my head is standing up a little bit. Before I got out of my car, I sent a text to my boyfriend, whom I live with, telling him that I was feeling uncomfortable about the situation and the house was creeping me out. And if he didn't hear from me telling him I was on my way home, then something is wrong. This person ordered a lot of stuff and it was just me doing the delivery, so it took me 3 separate trips to the porch and back to my car to get everything out. I grabbed as much as I could for the first trip, went to the porch to set the groceries by the door, and went back to my car for the next load without knocking and making minimal noise. When I go to the porch to drop off my second load, I got up to the second step before looking up to make sure I could see where I was going in the dark, and realized the front door is now open, and there was a man standing there, staring at me. He also didn't turn any lights on in his house aside from what looked like a single light fixture 3 rooms away. So there was just a faint back glow behind him, and I could only see his silhouette, none of his face or even what he was wearing. Shocked, I just blurted out, "Hello, how are you?" And he stood there and said nothing. Didn't reach for the bags, just looked at me. I dropped his bags off, went back to my car to get the last of the groceries, and didn't even make it up all the porch steps before dropping his groceries and turning around to run back to my car because Mans was still just standing in the doorway looking at me. I didn't get tipped on that order, but I'd like to consider the fact that I made it home that night my tip. Needless to say, I haven't stopped in that area again since. So this was my experience with the big killer clown panic of 2016. I think about it all the time and wonder what would have happened if I reacted differently and wasn't on my guard. I, a 6'2" male, was 16. I had just bought my own car for $1,000 from a buddy and took any chance I had to drive it literally anywhere. So one weekend I have a couple of days off from work in a row. I decide I'm going to go drive an hour to the small town I used to live in and see some of my old friends that still live there. It's about maybe 6 p.m. by the time I get into town, and I start calling some of the friends. No one is really answering yet, so I just go to my grandparents' house and say hi, just to kill some time. Well, I'm there for a while, and not a single one of my friends is free tonight. I'm kind of bummed. My family is just talking about how everyone is freaking out about the killer clown sightings and whether it's real or not, and I'm over it, so I just decide to leave. Now, it's about 8 p.m., just starting to get dark, and I stop at the only liquor/convenience store in town to get some cigarettes. I looked old and never got carded in this tiny town. Except the door is locked, and I don't see anyone or any lights when I peek in the door. That sucks, but whatever, I don't need cigs anyway. I do think it's weird though, as I've never seen that store closed once. As I'm walking back to my car, I notice it's weirdly quiet even for this town. It was kind of foggy, so I can't see too far ahead of me, and of course I have killer clowns on the brain, so I get a little spooked. Then out of nowhere, I see a woman come into view near where the road meets the liquor store lot. She's walking towards my car, the only car in sight, and shouts to me. I can't tell what she's saying at first, but she gets closer and I make out bits and pieces. She's petrified by the rumors of killer clowns. She tells me that 2 kids were just murdered down the street at the high school by one of them, literally half a mile from us. I don't believe her, but I did keep listening. She asks first if I can give her a ride to her house. Instantly, I say, no way. I know this town really loves drugs of all kind and just don't trust it. She keeps asking and won't leave, so I say, how about this? I'll drive on the shoulder behind or next to you as we walk home, so if anything happens, I'll be there, in my car. She says fine and we start going. She's going super slow. I have my hazards on, driving half on the shoulder down the country road as she walks beside my open passenger side window. A couple of times she says something like, come on, can't I just get in? I'm super scared. And I tell her there are no killer clowns, there's no need to be scared, and I'm not going to risk my safety. And she shuts up. After maybe 10 minutes, we turn down a dirt road that ends at a clearing, and I stop the car. She says, okay, I see my house from here, and I say, cool, see you later. She freaks out and says, no, you have to walk me to my house. She points to a big old farmhouse about 150 feet in front of us through the clearing. I say, no, I'm done. I told you I'd help you get home, and we're here. We can see her home right in front of us, and it just feels so off. At this point, she gets super weird. She starts rubbing her body up and down as if to be alluring and keeps asking, please, and implies that she'll do something for me in exchange. I put in reverse, start backing up, and she literally puts her arms and ducks her head in my driver window and asks/demands I give her any money I have. I don't have any, so I just shove some change from the pocket in my door into her hand and peel out. As I'm backing up to the main road, the whole time she's just staring at me, not walking toward her house. I drove an hour home and have been thinking about it since. I've always felt like if I walked up to her home, there would have been more people waiting to do whatever they wanted with me. Thankfully, I feel like I made the right choice and made it out with just a spooky story.
Hey friends, thanks for listening. Click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. I release every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, r/LetsReadOfficial, and maybe even hear your story featured on the next video. If you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations and bonus content over on Patreon, or click that big join button to hear all about the perks offered for the channel. And check out the Let's Read podcast, where you can hear all of these stories in big compilations and save huge on data. Located anywhere you listen to podcasts. Links in the description below. Thanks so much, friends, and I'll see you again soon.